Welcome to State Lobbying Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we delve into the careers and personal life stories of some of the best and the brightest state government relations experts. I'm your host, Deepak, CEO of Legistracker. Representative Terry England was the only child born and raised in Georgia. He grew up on a farm. His father, grandfather, and great-grandfather were all carpenters. Representative England was fascinated by politics since childhood. He went on a fifth grade field trip to the state capitol and fell in love with it. His early part of the career was in growing produce and later on in the farm supply business. As a Georgia House representative, Mr. England discusses what matters most to his constituents of District 116, transportation issues, means to good health care and education. Now, what are the essential qualities of a politician, and how does Representative England feel about the Georgia legislative process? We talk all about it in this next episode with Representative Terry England. Terry, thank you so much for being on the show. It is my honor to have you.
Good to be with you.
Let's jump into a rapid fire sort of questions. If you were to be the President of the United States, what is the one thing you would like to see improve?
Well, you just jump right in with a hard one to begin with. The temperament of the country, just the working relationships of everyone, regardless of party. You know, we're all Americans. We're all striving for the same goal, which is to take care of our families and raise them in a country that's safe and where they've got a future. And you know, I think that we've lost, and not pointing at anyone in particular. I mean, because it's been from both parties, but I think we have lost a lot of civility in politics today. And I think that's no great policy goal as somebody that would be president, but at the same time, I think it's something that's incredibly important that we all treat each other with respect and work to work together instead of having the gridlock that we see in DC today.
What would you be if you weren't in politics?
What would I be if I were not in politics? Probably would be a successful farmer. We farm some now, and I restore antique farm equipment, tractors, but I don't have a whole lot of time for that. The representative job does seem to take an awful lot of the time that I could be working otherwise. But we were in the feed and farm supply business for a long time and got out of that back in 2012. We would still be in that too, but it would be something related to agriculture.
What three skills do you think are essential for someone to be a good politician?
You've got to be a good listener, you've got to be a good communicator, and you've got to be motivated. And a self-starter.
Okay. What is your favorite book or hobby?
Ooh, favorite book. I got to look over at my bookshelf right now. Think about that one for just a little bit. Probably one of my favorites that I've read, and I read quite a bit, The Power Broker by Robert Caro, about Robert Moses in New York State and some of the things that he did and the way he went about doing them. And one of my other favorite books is Master of the Senate about Lyndon Johnson by Robert Caro as well. Those are probably two of my more favorite books. I do a lot of history, read a lot of history, so it's kind of hard to pick out one over the other on that. And then my hobbies are, I tell people a lot of times my avocation or hobby and my vocation are kind of the same thing, and that's ag and farming. I also, like I say, tinker with old tractors and restoration on old tractors, but also I'm a closet model railroader. I don't have a layout currently, but I do have everything to make the layout. I just don't have room and don't have the time right now, but those are kind of the things.
What inspires or motivates you to be doing what you're doing?
Probably the biggest thing is leave place that we are better than we found it. My grandparents did that. My parents did that. My great grandparents did that. Leave leave a better spot for your kids or grandkids or your nieces or nephews follow you, whether they get into politics or not, but just have a better place to call home than what it was when I started. Do things to provide more opportunities for young people that are coming along behind us.
What is your greatest achievement?
Probably being married for going on 34 years now, that I fooled my wife into putting up with me that long for all the things that I get into. But, I don't know. Outside of that, if we look into politics, I've managed to serve 17 years in the Georgia House, and all but one election has been uncontested. And the fact that we balance a budget in this state every year, and I've been able to be the kind of the leader in that for the last 11 years as appropriations chairman, and getting through the Great Recession. I took over as chairman right after, kind of as we were coming out of that, and then coming through the pandemic that we just recently had, and being able to balance our budget and continue to put money into our revenue shortfall reserve fund, a rainy day fund, putting significant money into it over the last several years. But being able to balance that every year, and we're dealing with about 27 billion in state funds, not counting federal funds, trying to take care of people.
Do you have any role models in your life?
Well, yeah, my parents, of course, are my role models in a lot of ways. My grandparents were. One of my actual best friends on the planet is one of my role models, just somebody that I look to, that he's about 14 years older than me, but we're like brothers in a lot of ways. But he's been a huge role model to me in a lot of ways. And then there's some younger folks that I kind of watch and just kind of stand in awe at the quality of individuals that they are. And the best friend that I mentioned, he has 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. The 3 of them and their spouses are certainly people that I watch an awful lot. And I know it's kind of odd that the younger be the role model for the older, but I think we always have to be watching and listening and learning. And, they've taught me an awful lot.
What if you had a chance to amend the Constitution without interference? What would you change?
U.S. Constitution or the Georgia Constitution?
Either or.
Oh, me. Well, that could be dangerous. I don't know that anything really comes to mind right off the top of my head that I would really jump at this point. The Constitution is I consider it a living document, but one that's kind of chiseled into rock at the same time. But I've been amazed and continue to marvel at the U.S. Constitution and the way that it was set up originally, even with the amendments, that how forward thinking that our forefathers were 200 plus years ago. And, just kind of the insight they had into people in general. It tells me that people then were about as sneaky sometimes as people are today. So I think they did an incredible job. And I don't know, I guess if I could say one thing, it'd be on the federal level that federal government has to have a balanced budget, just like the states do. So boom, there you go.
With that, let's jump a little bit into your past. Can you tell us, where did you grow up and how was your childhood like? And were there any glimpses of you being interested in politics back then?
Well, I was born and raised right here where I still live today in Barrow County, Georgia. My wife and I both were. We were in high school together, high school sweethearts. I guess my first sort of inkling, even as a kid, I'd always had a little bit of an interest in politics. I was just kind of fascinated by it. But it was actually a 5th grade field trip to the state capitol, and we were there and went into the House and the Senate chambers. They were considerably different at that time. They'd been modernized sometime in the 60s and had suspended ceiling and big curtains and all this kind of stuff, but still in the House chamber, I just remember thinking then as a 5th grader that this place feels comfortable, and this is a place that I think I would like to be at some point. And so just kind of filed that away. And as I continued to grow up and always thought about it, then I'd forget about it for a year or two, and then I'd kind of come back to it. And I had some mentors that were folks that were in elective office here in the county that I always kind of stayed in touch with, and when this seat came available back in 2004, one of those mentors recalled a conversation we'd had probably 20 years prior and called me one morning and said, all right, now's your time. And I had to ask, what is it, Miss Beth, what is it that you're talking about? And she said, your time to run for the House seat. It's what you wanted to do since you were in high school, middle school, and grade school, and now's the time to do it. And I tried to talk her out of it because I didn't think it was the time to do it at that point. But she was a very persuasive lady and very well respected in our community. And we went on and did it. Like I said, it was an open seat. There were only two of us competing for it. And the gentleman that ran against me, or I ran against him, however you phrase that, we were actually friends then. And both will tell you we're better friends today, which is very unusual in politics when people look at things and think that two opponents could go through that as friends and be even better friends once you're on the other side of it. You know, I see what gets spent on campaigns today. I'm just kind of floored by the amounts that are spent, because he and I together for an open seat spent just a shade over $19,000 total between our two campaigns that year. But all that said, like I said, I grew up here in Barrow County, only child, which my wife still regrets that I am an only child, because she has a brother. She says only children are kind of hard to deal with, but I tend to disagree with that. But grew up here on our farm. My dad, my granddad, my great granddaddy on my father's side were all carpenters and in building construction. That's kind of what I grew up in as well, driving nails. And then we farmed a little bit on the side as well. And then kind of my early career, I continued to do that, and then got into growing quite a bit of produce, and had a produce stand, whatever you want to call it, here at our farm, and ran a route with produce and to wholesalers and different things, restaurants and stuff like that. And then we had the opportunity to go in the farm supply business. We were in the farm supply business for quite a while as well. But it's nothing real exciting, but just kind of normal small town America sort of thing, I guess.
And can you talk a little bit about your District 116, and can you tell us like what issues you're currently working for your constituents?
Yeah, we're about 55 miles from downtown Atlanta to the northeast, up I-85, which kind of heads up to your neck of the woods. So a lot of the folks that live here commute back and forth to Atlanta daily using I-85 or another 4-lane, not really expressway, but kind of high capacity road called 316. And so with that, we're seeing a lot of growth, a lot of people moving in. And with that, of course, comes a lot of transportation issues. And how do you move all these folks that are moving here and buying a home and are building a home and bringing 2 or 3 vehicles with them, and typically on the road with all the vehicles they have just about every day, trying to get to and from places. So we have a lot of those kind of issues, and that we're in the middle of quite a bit of road construction here in our county, building a bypass around our hometown Winder, and then doing interchange improvements on 316, the other high capacity road I was talking about, that as it was built with that grade crossings. And so we're needing to do limited access on it because it's kind of a major thoroughfare between Atlanta and Athens. So there's a lot of traffic on it, a lot of accidents. So transportation, I would say just the ability to move people and goods is probably our biggest issue right now. And healthcare, of course, is always going to be an issue. We're very blessed kind of in this area that we have ready access to healthcare, some very, very high quality hospitals near us, and quite a few healthcare professionals that practice in and around the area. So that part, the access piece is there. It's sometimes the means for people to be able to access that healthcare becomes the issue. So that's kind of one of those constant issues on the back burner that you got to make sure that you pay attention to quite often. And then of course education is always a big deal too. So we have an incredibly good school system here in Barrow County, very committed and dedicated folks that are teachers and administrators within that system or within our system, and surrounded by several counties that also have very, very high quality education systems as well. Gwinnett County and Jackson, Oconee, Hall County to our north, and Walton County to our south. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's just, the biggest thing is trying to figure out how to get folks from one place to the other right now.
And if you were to define the Georgia legislative process in your own terms, how would you define it?
Herding cats. The Georgia House has 180 members and our Senate has 56. And any bill that passes and goes to the governor has to pass both bodies in some shape, form, or fashion. And a lot of times a bill that starts out doing one thing can very easily wind up doing something totally different, totally opposite. And you probably see that with your tracking service. And I think it's not just in Georgia, but I think it's the other 49 states as well, that there's still a personal touch to politics, and there's still a personal touch to what goes on at the Capitol. I have noted it change considerably in the time that I've been there, where more and more folks live closer and closer to the Capitol, so they commute in and out every day, and you don't have that chance to go eat dinner with one another and sit and talk about family and the things that are important to you, because they're getting back home to their family, and I don't blame them. I'm not being critical of that at all. If we had small kids, I'd be trying to figure out a way to get back home in the evenings as well. But that is changing the personality of politics, not just in Georgia, but in any state, where we're not having as much time as we used to get to know each other. And I pray and hope that we don't get to the point that Congress is, that they literally do not know those folks outside of their state delegations, and even in some of the larger states don't even know each other within the state delegations. We're still sitting at 14 congressional members here in the state, plus two United States senators. That's still a small enough group that they can get to know each other and regardless of party, and work together on a lot of things for the benefit of the state. You look at us, there's 236 of us, but at the same time, you'd be surprised at how quickly you get to know each other, because we're at a 40-day session, limited by our Constitution being 40 days of session, which typically spreads out over about a 3-month period, because the session days are the only ones that count. But those days that we're not in session, we're in committees and doing committee work, or we're working on budget or whatever. And so you spend an awful lot of time, not necessarily with all 236, but you spend an awful lot of time with 20 or 30 folks that you get to know very well. And we have a fairly high turnover rate. I think now my class, we pick up on seniority at number 20 or 21, and we came in 2005. And there, of the 39 of us that were in our freshman class, there are only 5 of us that are still there from that 39. So you have a lot of turnover. So every year, every election cycle, you've got a lot of new folks to learn, but then typically you wind up with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 special elections where somebody gets into the first year of the new term, and something changes in their life that they have to step out. And so then you throw somebody else new into the mix, and you just learn the new 25. Now you got to turn around and learn those other 4 or 5 more that just walked in the door. So a lot of churn that way, but a lot of very diverse backgrounds.
And you're the current chairman of appropriations. Can you tell us a little bit about what is the best part of working in that position, and what is the worst part?
Worst part is probably the worry that comes with it, worry about what state revenues are going to do and planning for that. Last year was a miserable year because it was, you went to sleep thinking about it, you woke up in the morning thinking about it, and trying to figure out what you're going to do, and your folks that are state troopers, or your Department of Corrections folks, or your teachers, or all those folks, how are you going to make sure that there's a paycheck at the end of the week for them. The best part though is the what you're able to do for people. what you're able to do to help people, whether it's through a lot of our services that deal with the handicap, or whether it's folks that are emotionally unstable that we're able to do wraparound services for and help them, or riding down the road and seeing a new school building that was in the budget, and knowing that that you had a hand in that, driving across a new bridge, or riding down a new road. Those kind of things are sort of the things that after the 40 days you're burnt out, you're spent, and you literally want to turn your phone off and ignore emails for 2 or 3 weeks just to kind of feel normal again. But then kind of once you kind of come back out of your shell, then you get to see what you've had a hand in helping other people with.
And the last question I had for you is, where do you see the future of Georgia politics, and how is it shaping up?
Georgia's is not unique compared to a lot of the other southeastern states where we've seen one party dominance run for many years. Democrats kept control in Georgia up until the early to mid 2000s, and since that point, Republicans have had both the House and the Senate. Gained the Senate in 2003, gained the House in 2005, swept all the constitutional officers in 2011. Before that, we'd had very few Republicans that were in constitutional offices, and had never had majorities in the House or Senate since Reconstruction. So I say all that to say that what I think, and I don't know that it necessarily, I know there's a lot of talk about Georgia turning purple or whatever. I think we get through another gubernatorial term or two, but then at some point, I think we see what a lot of other states are doing now, where you have Democratic governor for 1 or 2 terms, then it's followed by a Republican governor for 1 or 2 terms, and maybe another Republican governor, or it flips back Democrat, and you'll see the chambers start kind of doing that as well. The House and Senate chambers start going back and forth a little bit, but I think we're still a little ways down the road before that happens. But I just think in watching other states of similar size and similar demographic makeup and commercial makeup as far as business and everything, we're already seeing those states do something very similar to that. I don't know that Georgia's that far away from that starting to happen.
And finally, I would like you to take this last couple of minutes just to talk either about yourself, your district, your constituents, or your vision.
Well, I'll talk about my constituents first. Being born and raised here, well, let me back up. The district has changed considerably since I've been elected. We're becoming more and more a bedroom community of Atlanta, and not just Atlanta, but of Athens and Gainesville to our north as well. So a lot of things are changing. A lot of folks that have moved in that literally just sleep here at night but work somewhere else during the day. So that makes it difficult for somebody like me that grew up here and kind of knew all the families. And if I didn't know you directly, I knew your aunt, or I knew your grandmother, or your mama, or somebody, and would have a relation that way. And so it's changed a lot. But what I'm finding is a lot of the folks that are moving in here have very similar views to the folks that have been here my entire life. We're still a very conservative kind of area right here, and going to the east of us toward Jackson County and on over to the South Carolina line is very conservative. But I do see it changing. You asked about vision. I guess I had vision when I was your age, but now that I've gotten older, the vision is getting clouded by cataracts or something. I don't know what it is, but I don't know that my vision has changed that much, other than kind of how we started out on trying to leave the place that we're in, the place that we're planted, better than what we found it for our kids, our grandkids, nieces, and nephews, and all of those that follow us. That thing that I do lay awake sometimes thinking about is, I hope I don't mess something up that 25 or 30 years from now, somebody will look at and say, why did they do it that way? It would have been so much better if they'd have done X instead of Y. I just hope that I'm not guilty of doing one or many of those things that the next generation or two look back on and just say, I wish they'd really thought about this more. I kind of get I kind of get wrapped up in details a lot of times and get way into the weeds on stuff for that very reason, that very fear is, sit down and think about it. Okay, it's a great idea. Yeah, we're going to go forward with it. Hold on. All right, what could possibly go wrong, or what could be the unintended consequences? Let's stop and let's think about the unintended consequences. And I think as long as political leaders think about what those unintended consequences potentially could be on whatever the policy is, then I think you avoid the potential of mistakes, or the potential that 20 or 30 or 50 years from now, somebody looks back and says, I don't know what they were thinking. I wish they'd never done this. You want them to look back and say, man, I'm so glad they did this, because look at how it's got us set up today to move forward. And that's kind of what you want to do.
Well said. It is such an honor to have you on the show, Representative Terry England. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And look forward to keeping up with the podcast and seeing, hopefully your quality of guest improved dramatically after today. And but I do look forward to seeing who some of the other folks are that you wind up having on.
Well, thank you so much again.
Yes, sir. My pleasure.
It was truly my honor to have Representative England on this show. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. Have a nice day, and I will see you next time on the podcast.